This is our 17th local history talk since the society was formed. And I just want to announce that this talk will be on the history of mills in Bethany. It will be given by my father, Brinton Sr. Our fall meeting will feature Chris Sullivan speaking on the history of scouting in Bethany. And then following that, the winter talk in the year 2000 will be given by Don Menzies, and will be a history of the match industry in Bethany and Woodbridge. Just one matter, the dinner, which had been advertised for June 18th, has been postponed because it conflicted with the Volunteer Fire Department's parade. With that, I'd like to introduce my father, Bob Brinton Sr., who hopefully will give us an informative talk on mills in Bethany.
You mean there's a chance that I won't? Well, I want to thank you all for coming back again to learn more about our town. I'll share some of my information with you, but I want to reiterate what I've said in the past. All of these talks, whether I give it or some of your neighbors have given talks, should be considered a work in progress. That is, we've done some research, we've told you what we know, but there's more to find out. So, for instance, tonight, when we're talking about mills, if you have interest in a particular mill, there are ways of getting more information than I have or have been able to find. And just come and see me, and I'll try to steer you in the right direction. I would ask that if you find information, if you share it with us, put in our files. We're developing a growing bank of information about Bethany history. Tonight's subject is interesting to me, and I guess a lot of people, is dealing with a subject that is so obsolete that there are hardly any traces of the mills that Bethany once had. A couple of people have mentioned to me, how can you get a talk on mills? What's left? There's nothing left. Some people say, well, there weren't many mills, were there? Well, I think both of those are probably misconceptions. There were a number of mills in Bethany over the years. Tonight, I'm going to talk about 12 water-powered mills that existed at one time in Bethany. Some of them I have a little bit of information on, some I have a lot of information on. I probably have missed a lot of them. The way we're going to do this tonight is sort of a survey. Rather than just talking about one mill, we're going to make a survey of these mills. And we're going to do it instead of thematically, talking about grist mills and then talking about sawmills. And instead of doing it chronologically, talking about the earliest mills and then going to later ones, we're going to do it geographically. And the reason for this is many of you have come up to me after talks and said, gee, those are really great, but when you were going through, or when another presenter was going through, it's very hard to identify where those locations are in Bethany today. So for that reason, we're going to make kind of a circuit starting in the southwestern corner of the town, going clockwise, if you can kind of imagine in your mind's eye, toward the northern end of the town, up to the northern boundary, and then moving down to the southeast corner of the town. We'll make a big circle. And we're going to look for mills along the way and maybe some stories associated with those mills. Frank, are you around? I think he deserves a big hand for that. Very good, Frank. Try not to stand in the way, I guess I won't. We start off with falling water. The reason is that's what powered mills in the early days in Bethany. And we had mills for, I can't tell you when the earliest mills started, but we know that there were mills here, sawmills and grist mills in the 18th century. Can't tell you exactly when. It's difficult to trace back. You can trace land records, which are very laborious project. And land records, that is old deeds, don't always tell you what was on the property. They just tell you whose property was next to it, so you'd know which property you were buying, but it didn't always mention the houses or the mills. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they mentioned flowage rights, which were very important for if you were going to operate a mill. You needed the right to use the water in a particular water course. This is a very small stream. And one might look at that and say, how can you power an industry from this little stream? This happens to be a small section of Sanford Brook. And that's the brook that flows by the bridge where Hoadley Road and Wooding Hill Road cross. But that basically is the first type of non-muscular power that was harnessed here in Bethany. Indebted to Alvin Eisenman for going down to Yale this week and copying this map made by Blodgett from Middletown. William Blodgett was a map maker who created a map of Connecticut in 1792. You'll recall in 1792, I mean you won't recall of course from personal knowledge, but you may recall from history that in 1792 Bethany and Woodbridge were joined into one town called Anaheim. And this is a rough idea of what the town looked like. The southern half is the Woodbridge parish, and the northern half is the Bethany parish. This is the Woodbridge Church. This is the Congregational Church in Bethany in its original location on the green near Dayton Road. This building is the First Episcopal Church, which was at Church Corner, near the intersection of Tuttle Road and Carrington Road. And in between, we see this little dot, and that indicates a grist mill. Probably this was the Chauncey Beecher grist mill on Hilldale Road. Can't tell you that for sure, but it looks to me like this is probably Valley Road, this is probably Carrington Road. The rivers are a little bit inaccurate in here in this early map. However, we have the West River, we have the Sargent River. The confluence of the West River and Sargent River, you'll recall, is down by the filter plant on Litchfield Turnpike, the Water Authority filter plant. So we know that the Woodbridge line is in here somewhere. Probably that is on the Sargent River. That particular grist mill is probably the Sperry Mill, because that was an early mill. Sperry Mill was in operation in the late 18th century, from 1750 say on, something like that. So we have other mills around too, but I mean that's certainly a nearby one. On the West River, we have these two little stars, and those indicated sawmills. They're not supposed to look like saw blades, however, because at this time no circular saws existed. The circular saw wasn't invented till the middle of the 19th century. One other thing before I go on from here, I want to point out, it's interesting how important mills were. The only two kinds of structures shown on this map are churches and mills. This is the very familiar Beers Atlas of Bethany. And I throw this in here just to show you a couple of things. Mostly that Bethany has changed in size over the years. Just before this map was made, in 1865, we lost a chunk here to Woodbridge. We also lost a piece to Naugatuck. And we lost a large piece in 1871 to Beacon Falls. The present Bethany boundary is about here. All of this, pretty much this pink area going to the Naugatuck River, was became part of Beacon Falls when it was incorporated in 1871. The reason I mention this is that there were a lot of industries along the Naugatuck River. the home woolen mill, that large brick building which still stands, appears in our tax records. And when we're looking for evidences of mills, one of the ways to find it is by looking at our tax records, because if anybody kept good records of what existed in Bethany, it was the tax collector and the assessors, the board of assessors, because they listed everything that existed. And you look at the tax records, and if somebody owned a mill, they usually paid taxes on it. Unfortunately, tax records for mill, the tax records, the grand lists, do not show mills until 1819. So I can tell you, by looking at an 1819 grand list, I can tell you which mills were operating in 1819. Before that, it's a lot harder to find out. And that's the Beacon Falls district. There were a number of businesses here, especially the home woolen mill factory. That was all in the Bethany Grand List until 1871. I'm going to start off here with the most primitive kind of mill. I've had, as town historian, I've had a number of people ask me about this mill. Where is it? Can I find it today? No. The reason is that this mill was in Bethany only a short time. It was located on Litchfield Turnpike. In the background, this is the house previously owned by Paul Manger, and across the street is the Mary Lloyd Lee Farm. The Litchfield Turnpike isn't here, is in between. This was a tan bark mill, and was used to grind bark to extract tannins for tanning leather. It was found in Guilford. Clifford Whitlock's father, Clifford Whitlock, moved this to Bethany. And from there, I believe it went to Woodbridge, and then from there, I believe that it went, I'm not sure whether it went to Ford's Museum, but it went to some museum. Am I correct, Gilbert?
It went to Dearborn.
Dearborn, yeah. So this is out in Henry Ford's museum. Little quote, another shot of it. It just happens that it was here in the late 20s or early 30s when some photographs of it were taken. This was published in a guide to Connecticut that was done as a WPA project. So people who are starting to do research and they're looking up stuff in Bethany and some of the publications that came out in the 20s and 30s will find this handbook. Another mill that is not water powered would be a cider mill, and this was located on the corner of Johnson Road and Fairwood Road. Previously owned by the Woodward family, and then Bob Long. We probably took this a couple of years ago. By the way, Will took almost all these photographs. My son Will's out there, and he's very patient with me. But I went by here a couple of days ago, and it's much cleaner and neater. So we've got to go back, Bob, and take another photograph. I wish it had a little bit cleaner now back then. I was looking for a photograph of a windmill because in the 19th and early 20th century we had a few windmills in town. This isn't the one I was looking for. That's really a reproduction. There was a windmill right next to the building that we're in now, right across on the other side of the hedge. And as a youngster on the playground, I remember you could hear it squeaking and complaining about its lack of lubrication. There is a windmill left that was on the Valetsky farm that now has been moved to the Kriz farm. And that's the one I wanted to have. Just a little preview of coming attractions. This is a photograph of the match factory that stood on the north side of Bladen's Brook. And many people in Bethany were involved in this endeavor, making matchboxes at home, as a cottage industry. The boundary line in this area has been changed, so much of the land that went with this was originally part of Bethany. And I looked up some records recently, and I found that as recently as 1900, the Diamond Match Company, and you may have heard of that because they did pretty well, I think, who had purchased the Clark Match Factory, still owned 12 acres of property in Bethany. That's going to be the talk, by the way, by Don Menzies in the winter of 2000. Boy, it's hard to say 2000. I have trouble enough with the 1900s. Old Mill Road. I'm going to disappoint Sharon Huxley, who came to hear all about the mill on Old Mill Road, and I think I'll block some of the vision over here for a change. I don't really know much about the mill on Old Mill Road. I think it's interesting that it's been gone so long that there really is no memory of it. George Jackson has told me, who is sometimes a reliable source, that on an excursion with old Ellie Downs, he took him over Old Mill Road, and Ellie, this would be Ellie Downs' father, old Ellie Downs, mentioned the location of the mill as being on the brook, it's just a brook, on Old Mill Road between Valley Road and Shilf Road, the western end of Shilf Road. It's now disused. I don't know anything more about it. If anybody does, I would like to be informed, not necessarily now, but I have no idea what kind of a mill it was, but a mill it must have been. We just took a photograph of a little water course there. It's hard to believe that you could power machinery with the small amounts of water that we have in some of our brooks. This leads us into the forest industry and some use of water power for making logs, making beams and boards from logs. This happens to be a horse-drawn logging sled. This photograph was taken in Bethany in 1965, so it shows you how recently we used muscular power. We used horses for twitching out logs. It's very efficient because they do very little damage, and they can go places that one of the large skidders might have trouble with. We have no surviving up and down sawmills in Bethany, but we know that the early sawmills, certainly the ones in the Blodgett map, the William Blodgett map that I showed you, and any of the sawmills in the 1700s or probably up until the Civil War were up and down mills. And you had a saw blade there that went up and down by water power. Logs were rolled into the mill through this big wide open doorway. The log had to be rolled in onto the carriage, and the carriage would advance as the saw was going up and down with its reciprocal action, and that would saw through the log. I don't know if you've ever been there. This is a photograph from Sturbridge Village. Probably kind of representative of what an up and down sawmill in Bethany would look like. I want you to notice, I'm going to go back for just a second. I want you to notice the massive beams. This was necessary because you were harnessing power of water, and you were using it to do things that required lots of effort and lots of resistance. So you'll notice all these mills have massive components, lots of braces to support them. We're going to start in earnest now with our clockwise trip going from the southwestern corner of the town, and here we are. If anybody recognizes it, this is Bethmore Road. The little triangle there, and now has a house in it. This is what it looked like in 1868. It's amazing how little our roads have changed. This pond is still maintained. There's a match factory, by the way, I want to show you. This pond is still maintained by the Lures family, I believe, and they have worked on it on a couple of occasions after large storms. And I give them credit because it's so easy to let a dam fall into disuse, for it to crumble and be lost. And these people have spent a lot of time, effort, and I'm sure money to maintain the the dam on their property and the pond, which is so attractive. This was owned by the Northrop family originally. This particular mill, later owned by the Lenway family. This particular mill was a sawmill, grist mill, and cider mill. A lot of times you didn't have that combination. Usually you'd have a grist mill and a cider mill, and you wouldn't have a sawmill, or your mill would be just a sawmill. It was unusual to have that. Notice how recently this was operated by water power, 1970. This house is still there. That's, if you recall, the intersection of Bethmore Road and Route 67, Seymour Road. Seymour Road's out there. And here's the mill pond. And dimly visible is the outline of the mill. Probably this highest part is the part that was a grist mill. Because usually you had to elevate the flour of the grain up, and it came down by gravity toward the millstones. We have a wonderful series of photographs about this mill because a later resident of the property at this time was a young girl, and she sent me these photographs and wrote a nice letter saying that she went to camp in 1937 and was given a camera, and she took photographs of everything. You know, when kids first get something, that first blush of enthusiasm, you know, like the first time they do chores. And then, well, anyway, she took a lot of photographs, so that helped to date when this mill came down, probably 1937, 1938. Here it is before it's demolished. As I said, probably this is the grist mill part. You can see holes in the roof. You can see the roof boards through there. So this building is not being kept up. It's no longer being used in the 1930s, in the late 1930s. And it becomes just a burden, just a liability. It's just a building that you have to maintain but doesn't do anything for you. And generally buildings like this are doomed. And certainly this one was. I kind of like the rowboat. The photograph is being taken facing to the west. In other words, we are looking toward the bridge on Bethmore Road. And we only just replaced this bridge a few years ago. It was very close to the bridge. If you drive by there today, you'll still see some of these foundations. That's one reason I'm trying to acquaint you with these locations. So when you drive by, look a little more carefully. And those stones may not be just a stone wall. Those stones may represent the base of an early industrial building. This is kind of a pretty winter scene. I couldn't, hard to call something like that. The mill pond is frozen over. We're looking up here at the Manger House and Manger Field. This is the demolition. See the crew here working on demolishing it. They've taken down a building on the east side, an addition on the east side. Having taken out the whole east wall of the building, there's no support for the roof. And despite the fact that it must have leaked for years, and the roof boards and probably the front plate that supports the rafters is probably rotted, it's still standing and still a pretty straight bridge. Just a tribute to the strength of a post and beam frame structure. These are kind of heartbreakers when you see this happening. But notice here, it's not very often you get to look inside a mill. We have no photograph of the inside of an early mill. One reason was that there really wasn't the technology. If you were going to take take a photograph, you'd probably have to use flash powder. Not a good thing to use in a grist mill. Probably not great in a sawmill either. Notice the massive beams here. These kind of redundant beams. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite familiar with the structure there. Lots of diagonals. You know, this was built to last. This mill, by the way, is on the tax list for Bethany in 1819. So we know that this was well over 100 years old when it was torn down. This gives you an idea, JB, how close the building was to the bridge. As a matter of fact, it looks like they put up a couple of poles there to discourage errant vehicles. Again, the long diagonal braces. This would be the door, and you basically, if you open the door, it would be almost in the road. I just like this. This is the house we were just looking at. Again, this is the mill. You see the mill there? It's a two-story part. The pond you can hardly see. But it looks up, and it just, by the way, many of these photographs have never been seen by a group such as yourself. They come out of people's attics and collections, and it's kind of fun for me, and I hope it is for you, because it's kind of like a window into the past. It gives us a chance to look at what Bethany looked like in earlier years. This was probably around 1937. This is Bethmore Road. This area is called Squabble Hill, and some people call this Squabble Hill Road. This is Paul Manger's farm, probably a silo there. Carrington Farm is up here. This area has been developed as the Pine Brook Crossing subdivision. These fields in the back are probably the Bethany Farm subdivision. These were all open fields in those days, all pasture, some of it cleared for planting of various crops. The mill, you remember I mentioned, is very well maintained. And there aren't many things as picturesque as a mill pond, with trees reflecting in it. This is the kind of photograph that you put on a travel brochure. Okay, we're going to be moving north now, and to the next mill, and this is on Pine Brook. As a matter of fact, there were two mills on Pine Brook that I know of, practically side by side. Two adjacent houses had mills. This particular mill originally belonged to the Hotchkiss family. Later on, the Rochers, Adrian Rocher, and subsequently Clifton Rocher, who was, some of you may recall, was a tax collector in Bethany for many years. And this is a fairly late letter billhead, 1927. He's still blacksmithing and sawing and a little et cetera once in a while too. There was a mill on this property. This is where John Matson now lives. You're familiar with that house. And immediately in back of it, there's the remains of a dam, which is clearly visible from the bridge over Pine Brook that carries the new Bethany Farms Road. So we took this from right next to the bridge. And you can see, this pipe has been added, but you can see originally the dam was up here somewhere. You're going to find this is very typical. Dams tend to create their own spillways. They erode over time, and eventually they become almost totally breached. So a dam like this holds back hardly any water today. The next one we're going to look at is the Chatfield sawmill. And this was, trying to think of this is Henry W. Chatfield, I believe, owned a mill on the north end of Bear Hill Road. This would be the part of Bear Hill Road that extends north of Hinman Road. There's a gate there today. If you walk down that road, which is still town property, still public, you come to the bottom of that hill, there's a little pond there, Chatfield Pond, and it has a dam over it, and that was the mill dam for the Chatfield sawmill. I put this here. This was part of a spreadsheet that was made to indicate the expenses for the farm. Notice up here he has, if I can read it, 342 acres. He has a sawmill. He got this sawmill from H.W. Chatfield. He inherited it in 1912. And if you looked at the rest of the spreadsheets, he's doing a depreciation schedule on all of this stuff. What's interesting to me is that he's showing his basis here. He's showing his investments. Obviously, this was an inheritance, but down here, notice wheel and shafting, water power, dam, value of the dam. So he still values this water power resource in I think this was done in 1922. I think 1922 is the latest date here, and I think that's the date of this document. Interestingly enough, he sells the property next year, 1923, to the Ansonia Derby Water Company, now the Birmingham Utilities. And, of course, that's the end of this particular sawmill. It's no longer used. It's demolished. I don't have any picture of it being demolished. This is a photograph of what the mill looked like. We're looking north from that gravel road that I described. This would be the broad open end where these lots would be rolled in. This photograph was taken in 1908, by the way. Difficult to discern, but there is a horse and buggy here just about to cross a bridge. And the bridge, this is unusual, the bridge was over a narrow waist in the mill pond. Remember I mentioned earlier, one of the ways you can trace mills, who owned a mill, was to look at the tax records. And I reproduced just this one to show you, there's Henry W. Chatfield in 1872, and here's his mill, $50. Actually, that's me up there, but that's not the purpose of this slide. The purpose is to show you what a mess the Birmingham Utilities did with the dam. They were concerned that the dam might not be stable, and the least expensive way to maintain the dam was to buttress it. So they poured these concrete steps, like some sort of pyramid, against the face of the old stone dam. It was a beautiful stone dam, and this is just concrete, and it's, shall I say, less attractive. But the mill pond is still attractive. If you look right here, this is a bridge abutment. This is the other one. And up until a few years ago, there was an old wooden bridge across there. And that was the bridge that the buggy was crossing in the earlier photograph. This is a water intake. And this little reservoir actually is not being used today, but it's connected with the Peat Swamp Reservoir in Woodbridge. And this actually was used for many, many years to provide additional flow for the Peat Swamp Reservoir. Okay, let's move along, see if we can not get you too lost. This is Amity Road. Actually, this is Grant Road today because they changed it. This is Beacon Road. You can tell because there are Lounsbury's. This is Cheshire Road. Are we oriented? Do we know where we are? This is Lacey Road. Anybody? Anybody not know where we are? Either you're all with me or you're all asleep. I'm not sure which. Okay, there's really two mill ponds here. From the records, I'm not quite sure what the scoop was, but at one time, Issa French had a sawmill. Now, it may have been this mill pond. I don't know. But we do know that this mill pond did have a sawmill, and that mill building was not torn down until the 1950s. This was the Perkins sawmill. And Isaac Perkins lived in this house. Trailer park is in here now. Does that help? Isaac Perkins lived here. The sawmill was here. This sluiceway brought water from the pond through the mill and then back into the river. This is all that's left of the dam for the lower dam that you saw in the picture. By lower, I guess it's north. It's at the top, it was at the top of the map, actually. Originally, this would have been all impounded water. The dam would have been way up there. Now it looks just like a stone wall with some water running through it. But originally it powered a mill. Difficult to see, but be creative. There's actually penstock. There's like a ditch here. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's hand dug. This is a bank that's been built up with material. It's dug out of this sluiceway. This concrete structure was to regulate the height of the water in that sluiceway. And if you look here, there's a little slot. You could drop planks down in there, and the more planks you put in, the higher the water level would be in this sluice. By the way, these were all taken, these were probably taken about 1994 or something like that. So we're not looking at ancient stuff. There's Will. Can't see it right now, but this is the end of that sluiceway or penstock, and there's an angle of concrete, and then there's a round hole and a big iron pipe, and the iron pipe comes through to bring the water down to the mill. The mill was actually on top of this. The floor of the mill was even with the top of that. If you look at the masonry here, you can see that it's been redone over the years. If you look, it's sort of a line here, and it's sort of a line there. And the reason is there probably was a water wheel there years ago, maybe at the time of the Civil War. And later on, they filled it in and introduced this pipe so that it would feed a turbine. We have Arnold Peterson to thank for this series of photographs of the mill. They're the only ones I know that exist. The sawmill, again, the large door where you would put your logs in was there. This is probably where the beams and boards would come out to the side of the mill. This would have been at least in its last incarnation, would have been a circular sawmill. I think this is Arnold's children as they appeared in the 1950s. This is looking toward the back of the mill. And those mills are always on a hillside because if you're building near water, if you're building near a stream, you're always going to have a lower level and an upper level. The logs come in here, and the floor is about at that level where the sawing actually takes place. This is intriguing. It doesn't show much, but I remember as a youngster walking down this stream and walking around the mill and seeing this little opening and looking inside, and inside was this turbine, which is still here today. Not many evidences of old mills. Originally, there was a wooden box. You can only see remains of it. And to connect the turbine to the penstock pipe. There would have been there are two gate valves here. This is a horizontal turbine. In other words, water came in through here and it went around and exhausted down here to the tail race, back down to the brook. And I had two pulleys here and here. And probably one ran the saw. Another one may have run the planer or some other piece of equipment up in the upper level of the mill. Okay, we're going to move as far north as we're going to go tonight in Bethany, and we're going to look at a mill that's located, Mr. Lineweber I'm sure is familiar with this one, located on the corner of Edwards Road and Litchfield Turnpike. Again, we were just here. Trailer park is here. Edwards Road is there. The mill, there's a mill and a house, and it says cider mill. This is Twitchell. Well, actually, Isaac Heim owned this. Again, this is one of these mills that goes back probably to 1819, and it had multiple uses, not just the cider mill. He maintained a mill that did a lot of things with textiles, with cloth. They did fulling and they did carding. And carding is kind of a brushing operation where you straighten out the fibers of the cotton or the fibers of the wool and make it so that they're parallel to each other. They can then be twisted into a yarn or thread. And it's a very laborious job to do by hand, but by machine, it can be done very quickly. Fulling, I don't have a clue. I just understand that it has something to do with taking homespun material and mixing it up with water and some chemicals or something, and kind of beating it and making it into a fluffier, softer kind of a piece of cloth. This is probably an equivalent of putting one of those little things in your dryer. The Twitchell Mill, and he was listed in 1832, I think it was listed as 2 mills. So they might be counting the cider mill and the textile mill as separate mills. This was the residence. This building is still here. It's been moved across the brook. And this property was purchased by the Connecticut Water Company. You notice that a lot of these mills were purchased by water utilities because that's where the water was, and that's what the utilities wanted. It just happened that the mills wanted that area too. And this would be the building where his mill was located. It's difficult to tell from these photographs exactly what motive power was used. Did he use a wheel? Did he have a turbine? I don't really know. I mean, we know with a Perkins saw, no doubt about it. With most of these, we don't have a clue. This is kind of a view that most of you haven't seen. It's in Bethany. That's Twitchell Pond. And this is a mill pond up above the mill. It's now being used by the Connecticut Water Company. This is an active water source. Is there a pipe in there? No, not really. This is an aeration process. They have a large reservoir above it, and they run the water down from the large reservoir and let it go through these pipes. Looks pretty primitive, doesn't it? But I guess it's effective in its aeration of the water. Okay, we're going back to Sturbridge just for a moment because we don't have any interior photos of early mills. This happens to be, this happens to be the fulling mill, the carding mill in Sturbridge Village. So if any of you folks have been there recently or you're going there, you got to look for this. This is down underneath, which is kind of the most interesting part to me. This has a tub mill. It's the water's coming down through a box here that you can't see very well. It goes into this, and it's forced to spin in a to spin around before the water can get down into the tailways. It has a vertical shaft. Remember, this is very much like a turbine, but it's not quite a turbine. Not as efficient. The turbine is kind of closed, and it just uses all the pressure of the water, more efficient. But they didn't have that back in these days. Remember, Sturbridge Village tries to aim for 1830, in the 1830s. Well, that's just about the time that the Twitchell Mill was carting out cotton and wool. You notice this vertical shaft turns this bevel gear. There's another bevel gear. If I'm getting too technical, don't let me know. Turns this shaft, and then you have belts going up, and depending upon the diameter of the belt, you'll get different speeds for your machines up above. I love this machine. There are 2 of them here. There's one in the back of this gentleman, and this is a carding machine. And this was made in 1830. It's in Sturbridge, but it was made in 1830 in Maine, and was used for I don't even know how many years. But it's beautiful working condition. Probably this is very similar to the machine at the Twitchell Mill. At least I can't prove that it isn't. I just took this out as a photograph out of another book showing a fulling mill, and it looks to me like just a big washing machine. It looks like you open up a couple of doors and throw the cloth in there and add whatever you want, your little downy thing, and turn it on and just let it feed itself. That's That's all I know about Fulham. We have a couple places to go here. This is a shingle mill. It was a shingle mill. There's very little evidence of it today. I haven't really done much research on it. Never found a photograph of it. If any of you have a line on any photographs of mills that we don't have, we would really appreciate your donating or even lending it to us. This was located, we're going to remember we were up here at the, this is the Perkins Sawmill was up there, Lacey Road, Cheshire Road, Beacon Road, Amity Road, Litchfield Turnpike. Nowadays, people would call it Lay's Pond. When I was a kid, it was a hotel pond. And there was a shingle mill here, water power shingle mill, which is just a special type of sawmill. You sawed shingles. Shingle is just a piece of wood that's papered. This is what's left of the dam on the hotel pond. This is me down there for scale. So there's still a lot of the dam left. However, I can remember when the dam continued like that, and there was a considerable amount of water in there. It was enough to swim. And that's what's left of the hotel pond today. Two things are at work here. One, the dam is degraded and lowered. And the second thing is tremendous amount of siltation. So there's very little water in here. It doesn't hold back much water left. The state doesn't even care about dams like this. They figure it holds so little water, even if it broke, who cares? By the way, this dam belongs to the state of Connecticut. That little triangle was purchased by the state of Connecticut when they straightened Amity Road, and they bought this area. I have talked to them about whether they'd be interested in maybe restoring it or something like that, and I found out. Okay, we're going to be going, we're a little bit south now, again, so you're not lost. This is Amity Road. This is Falls Road. This is Hilldale Road. Some of the works that used to be in it. And right down at the lowest part of Hilldale Road was a mill. And this, in 1868, it belonged to Chauncey Beecher. And it was a grist mill. And we have a deed up on the table here that mentions the sale of it. And they describe it as a corn mill and grist mill. And there's another word there I can't read. Kind of fascinating. Again, the water authority, the water company bought this, not the water authority, the water company bought this around 1903, something like that. And in the meantime, in the 1870s, in the 1880s and 1890s, it belonged to a family by the name of Keller. And they evidently ran a mill here. And it was called Kelly Mill at that time, and this is called Kelly Mill Road, a name that's kind of disappeared. Mill. This was taken by George Jackson. I'm sure he had permission to trespass on the water company property. But I kind of like it. It's really the best photograph I have of the dam above the Beecher sawmill. And again, it's already started to break away. It was probably up a lot higher. One of the interesting things is, all of these dams, if you look carefully, they always have a window or little windows. I don't know whether it was used to attach some sort of a wooden penstock to bring water to an overshot wheel, or water would go over the top of the wheel. I don't really know. I wish I did. This was kind of interesting. But they usually have stones stacked up, and they have a stone lintel across, like that. And it's kind of interesting. And you'll see it over and over again in different mills in different places. This was taken last week. Yeah, last week. And it shows the foundation. This is what you can see when you cross the Little Brook on the Hilldale Road. Back in Sturbridge. This is fun. It's like a school trip. Just want to show you a water wheel. This is an undershot wheel, probably for uses like a sawmill. You want to get as much power as possible. And in Bethany, where we had a big drop, if you had a 20-foot drop or something like that, you could take a wheel like this and introduce water at the top, and an overshot wheel would turn like that. An undershot wheel, where the water's coming low, and just kind of pushing these veins away, or dumping onto the veins and the weight turning it, this would run clockwise. If it was overshot, it would run counterclockwise. Here we are back in the basement where I'm comfortable. I'd like to look at the equipment here. This shaft is hooked to the water wheel on the outside of the building, and this huge wheel here has wooden teeth. Every one of those dark spots is a wooden tooth, and it connects with a lantern gear to change the power, so you have a vertical shaft turning up there to rotate the millstones that ground the grain. In a grist mill, it was a good idea to have wooden gear teeth. One of the reasons was, of course, you wouldn't strike sparks, because fire was always a problem in a grist mill. The powder, flour, dust was very volatile. This is just a wonderful photograph of the inside of a grist mill in Maine in 1890. But it's probably just about what one of our mills would have looked like. The stones would have been inside this wooden housing. There'd be a lower stone that did not turn, and an upper stone that did. This little crane device here, you see the little handles? This would allow the miller to pull this over and be able to lift the stone up, because the stones had to be sharpened from time to time. They had little grooves, and the grain, whatever it was, whether it's corn or wheat or rye, getting caught between these two stones would get crushed, would get ground, and then would be conducted by these little grooves to the outside to be collected into bags of flour. You'll notice in these mills, you'll always see a little wheel like that. Well, that wheel controls the water power. Either it controls a gate to prevent water from getting to the water wheel, or it controls a gate to regulate the amount of water going to a turbine. Okay, now we're going to the most famous industrial complex in Bethany, Hoadley Mills. And there really were two mills here, very different, the upper mill and the lower mill, eventually owned by the Hoadley family. To orient you, this is Litchfield Turnpike. Litchfield Turnpike, here. This is Hoadley Road. This is Wooding Hill Road. Our present bridge is right in that area. They've changed this a little bit. This is the intersection of Barrington and Litchfield. Are we all together? Good. I know none of you are going to ask for directions. At least I meant it. Okay. Let's take a look at the Hoadley Mills. Two of them. Let's start with the upper mill. This is the dam for the upper mill. You can see it's in nice condition, nice and straight, holding back large amounts of water. This water was conducted south from the dam through a sluice. I've read that there was a wooden sluice that went under the bridge. There's also evidence that there's some underground conduit for water. So I'm a little unsure whether one or both of these systems was used for conducting the water south. Here's the bridge area. This is Wooding Hill Road. Hoadley Road is right there. Actually, this little thing, I don't know what it's for. If you drive by today, it's there just like that. By the way, I haven't dated these photographs, but most of these photographs that you're seeing date from around the turn of the century, in the 1890s or the early years of the century. So we can pretty much say these photographs are about 100 years old. So you're just stepping back a century. This house was built by Anthony Hoadley, later occupied by his son Gary Hoadley, and they conducted the grist mill in this immediately across the road. They also conducted a store in there, a little general store, in a barn across the road. Incidentally, all of this stonework is surviving. Well laid up dry. It was done so beautifully that in the 30s, 20s or 30s, I can't remember now the date, when they replaced this plank bridge with concrete, they simply put a concrete bridge across the existing abutments. So those abutments that you drive over every day were put there probably at least 150 years ago, maybe 200 years ago, because the Hoadley mill, the Hoadley grist mill, does show up on the 1819 tax record. It's on the grand list, so it was already there in existence in 1819. You know that much. That's Gary Hoadley, and this is, I'll show you a few photographs. Fortunately, this was such a picturesque area that a lot of people photographed it. Most places in Bethany they didn't see. Not many people had cameras in 1900. They just weren't common. They were cumbersome. You had to put your head under a hood. You had messy plates to work with. We didn't have handheld cameras at that time that were very good, so not many people took photographs. This is kind of nice because you can look up. This is the side of the grist mill, and you can look up underneath the bridge and see where the dam is. So the dam for the grist mill was north of the bridge. The mill was south of the bridge. If you stood there today, you would see this wall. You see that little notch? Hasn't changed a bit. See the wall? The little notch? I'll go back. Give you a say ooh and ah. Okay. And again, as I said, this is the original stone abutment. That's the way it looks today. This painting, which was donated to the library by Orton Camp a year or two ago, is of the upper Hoadley Dam, the one we were talking about. And it was, I don't know exactly when this was painted, whether it was in the 50s or 60s, but it's a very haunting vision of a dam, a mill dam, and the water rushing out. And you can see the level is already been seriously compromised. This photograph, I believe, was also taken by George Jackson. And I think when it was, probably, I can't remember the year. George, when was it? 60s? What?
Yeah,
60s. Good enough. 1965, something like that. And you can see this is similar to, the dam's a little bit more worn down now that it's had some time to let the elements work on it. There's one of those little windows with a lintel. See that? Now the next photograph shows you after the 1982 flood, which took out some more of this dam. What's left of the opening of the dam is more like this. Okay, watch that spot. Very precarious there, isn't it? Just to kind of show you the progression. You know, if there's something that doesn't love a wall, I guess there's something that doesn't love a dam also. Pretty much what that dam looks like today. Not sure the function of this, perhaps some part of a control mechanism for an underground sluiceway that conducted water to the mill. This is one of the three surviving millstones from Hoadley Mills, which is actually located on the property where Denzel Hoadley lived, son of Gary Hoadley, grandson of King Hoadley. This is another style of stone. That's me petting it, by the way. This one is very good condition. You see, the other one's pretty well worn and beat up. That one looks like you can still use it. And this probably stopped turning a century ago. Now, we're lucky to have some photographs that were published of the Hoadley Mills. And these came, most of these came from Bethany and its hills. We're looking at the grist mill. We were looking at, remember before, we were looking upstream at that retaining wall and little pieces of mill here. Incidentally, at the one end of this mill, the Hoadleys had a bone cracker, a bone mill. So when the farmers got through butchering, they brought the bones down, they were ground up and used for fertilizer, brought back and put on the field. Nothing wasted. Hoadleys were extremely ingenious people. Going down 1904, right at about this time, the South Central Regional Water Authority, actually then it was the New Haven Water Company, bought all of this property, and these mills were all loved. This is the grist mill. This was taken from that tinted photograph up on the front table, and that was loaned to us by Arnold Peterson. And it's just a very charming photo. There are a couple of cows there. Picture that spot. Okay, we're moving downstream now because the Hoadleys believed in recycling, and they recycled the water. And when they ran the water through the first mill, they let it run down the brook, and they built another dam and used the water over again. How thrifty can you get? This is probably Denzel Hoadley, the third generation of Hoadleys to operate mills on this site in front of his house, which this house still stands on the hill overlooking the mill. This is Denzel Hoadley. I just kind of like this. This is you probably can't read it, so you're going to have to take my word for it. I've never lied to you, so you can believe me. This is from 1904 Sunday Chronicle. New Haven must have been some supplement to the newspaper or something like that. 5 cents, yeah. And the word is the old mill beside the waterworks, Bethany. And we're looking at the lower mill. And the lower mill was the lumber mill. That was the sawmill. Kind of picturesque. Excellent quality photograph of this is showing the roadside of the sawmill. The sawmill was set back from the road a good distance, and you really couldn't see it. You can't, even today, you can't really see the ruins of this. They're back far enough that you can't see the dam, you can't see the foundations. But here's the horse. They're unloading logs. Remember, you have that big door to roll the logs in up onto the carriage. By this time, it was probably a circular saw. No, these are all mill buildings.
No, I mean, to the left. Through the trees.
No,
Further
no, there are no houses in there. Well, wait a minute. You might be seeing through the trees, you might be seeing the Selleck House, which stood on Litchfield Turnpike right near the corner of Litchfield and Wooding Hill. There were a couple of early houses on the east side of Litchfield Turnpike that the water company demolished. Very attractive. We were lucky enough to find a couple of photographs of them. They're just beautiful. It's a shame that we lost them. This is almost a similar shot to the one that appeared in the newspaper in 1904. This shows the mill building, shows the dam. We're able to look through the open door, and this light space you see is the large door where the logs were rolled in. Now, usually you cut logs would be a maximum of 16 feet long, and so you need a doorway that was, maybe 18 feet wide or something like that, with no support. So that's something that, they had to work out. How do they support that large area so that they could get get the logs in full length? Then there would be a carriage in there, and the boards would come out this end. See where they built the platform up with some uprights? Because it was so steep, they had to do that. This is a photograph of looking over the dam. The dam's here, so you can't see it. And looking at the mill. And again, a very, very picturesque mill pond. Those of you who attended the Jerry Hungerford's talk on Tales Tombstones Tell will recall that there was some very unfortunate circumstances associated with Denzel Hoadley and his mills. This mill that he ran was originally built by a John Wood, later owned by the Hoadleys. This mill pond was a scene of an unfortunate incident, and that was his young 2-year-old daughter toddled down from the house and drowned in the mill pond. In addition to losing his daughter, you see there's 2 burials there. By the way, this was taken about 1900, that photograph. Stone is still there, tree is slightly larger. The other unfortunate incident was their 14-year-old son was operating the grist mill, and his clothing got caught up in the machinery, and he was crushed. And his mother heard the grist mill running without any grain. It made a different sound. It was a stone-to-stone sound. And she went down to investigate and found that her son had been caught up in the machinery and just literally crushed because of that. And so they lost 2 children in those 2 mills in a fairly short period of time. And those were the good old days. This stone is in the Methodist Cemetery. Let's see. This stone is in the Methodist Cemetery on Litchfield Turnpike. And it's, if you can remember, it's sort of between where Whitting Hill Road veers off and where Hatfield Hill Road crosses. On the west side of the road, there's a cemetery up on a bank. At one time, there was a Methodist church there. Today, it's just a cemetery, and the stone is here. Just another photograph of how picturesque the waterfall is here. I particularly like that little cascade next to the summer. This is what it looks like today. We want to go back. That little window is there, I believe. There's the dam. 100 years ago. Go ahead, Bob. And here's where it is today. Originally, the dam would have been up there. You can see there's one of those little windows again. And this water is on its way to Bethany Lake.
Mike, do they use the window to drain the pond to repair this
Could be.
top of the dam?
Yep. Likely. Just another view of it. So you can still see there's some drop there. It hasn't degraded entirely. Here's something anybody that came here to learn about the nail works isn't going to learn much because I don't know much about it. But there are many references to the nail works and to the nail works dam. And the nail works dam, this is the pond for the nail works dam. It was just north of the old location of Hilldale Road, of Hatfield Hill Road. Okay, let's see if we can get organized again. Here's Litchfield Turnpike. We are right up here at Holy Mills. This is Hatfield Hill Road. This is Sperry Road. This is Barrington Road. Are you getting with me? This is Downs Road. This is Hatfield Hill Road. Hatfield Hill Road now turns here and comes out like that. Because instead of this little mill pond, the New Haven Water Company built a large reservoir at the lake. I only threw this in here because this is a 19th century document that was found in the files of the South Central Regional Water Authority. It's a certificate from an engineer that just says it certifies that the New Haven Water Company dam across the West River, the town of Bethany, is okay. But what I liked up here is it says Bethany Dam, aka Nailworks Dam. That was probably written in the 1890s. And that's when the dam was built. And this is what the dam looked like while it was being built. I've shown this once before. Actually, we showed two of them. I'm going to show you one. And this is the Lake Bethany Dam being built. This little building has been torn down, but originally the road was down at this level. In the 1930s, they filled it to about this level so that it was higher than the ridge of that roof. So most of this dam today is hidden. But what I wanted to show you is this is the old layout of Hatfield Hill Road. This is the dam across the brook, bridge across the brook, and the dam must have been up there. The nailworks was gone by 1892. I've said this before, if you ever go up in a small plane over Bethany, or you look at a map or anything, you can always find Bethany Lake because it's the one that looks like a dinosaur foot with 3 toes. And the original site of Hatfield Hill Road went right through there, the road got up there, and by the old downsides. So that totally flooded the whole valley. Pretty much what the road looked like up until recently. It's now been closed. This bridge is being rebuilt and will reopen soon. Incidentally, many people don't realize it. The town of Bethany doesn't own this road. It belongs to the South Central Regional Water Authority. We get to use it, but they actually own the land. But there's an agreement that goes back to the 1890s that says that, we get to use it. By this time, by the 1890s, water power was getting to be kind of obsolete because other power was coming into popularity. In this case, steam power. This is a portable steam saw. This is a steam engine, big smokestack with a spark arrestor. And this was taken in 1901, I believe, near Lebanon Swamp. With a steam rig, instead of hauling the logs to the mill, you hauled the mill to the logs. And this was you could put this on wheels. You could get a team or a couple of teams of oxen and bring it to where you wanted, set it up. This thing had a hinge on it. It would hinge down. When you wanted to set it up and use it, you lifted it up and hooked your belt onto the saw, and there you were. I just look at the size of this log. I don't know if you can get an idea from the gentleman in front of it. If you look at this photograph, I know you can't see it from where you are, but it's a chestnut tree. You can tell by the grain. And there are huge chestnut trees at that time. This is just before the chestnut blight hit, and we began to lose all the chestnuts in the town. Another photograph of the same mills, I believe. You see how it's mounted on wheels? The horizontal boiler here. One of the problems with doing research on mills through tax records is that somewhere along the line, people started buying little portable pieces of equipment to cut their firewood. Everybody used firewood for fuel, and they had to have some source of power. And often it was a gasoline engine. In this case, it was a steam engine. You can see the boiler here. and it powered this cordwood saw. We used to call it buzz saws when I was a kid. They're just cutting poles up. It looks like they're cutting about a 12-inch piece, probably for stove wood, to slip into that Glenwood stove. Keep that stew simmering. Get ready for winter. Keep the house. However, the bad part is that they began reporting every one of these little things as a mill. So now, instead of having the number of mills, maybe instead of having 6 mills in town, as they did in, say, 1872, or maybe having 4 mills, as they did in 1903, now we have 15, 20 of them. And sometimes they put in parentheses engine. And sometimes even call what the engine was, which helped us out. Portable mills have been used up until modern times. This is a mill that was located on Alice Wooding's property. Photograph was taken in the 1950s. I believe that's Buster Johnson. I believe that's Alice Wooding. And you can see there's a log on the carriage there. And they've got a gasoline engine running it. I remember going up there when it was operating. However, it seems to me most of the time it wasn't operating. Always seems to be something wrong with the carburetor. We're coming to our last, for those of you who are really getting bored here, we're coming toward the end. We're coming to the last mill in Bethany, the last of our 12. And this mill is appropriate because it was the last one to be built. This mill was not built until 1874. This is Ball's Mill on Downs Road. Okay, to orient yourself, Downs Road. This is Brooks Road. Brooks Road presently goes like that, a little bit more. It used to have that configuration. They show a turnpike over here. The Downs Road Causeway is in this area today. In those days, the West River was just a little brook. There was no Lake Watrous. Lake Watrous starts today about in this area. And just a nice aerial photograph showing Ball's Mill. Again, it's on a bank on the side of a stream. They all are. We're looking down at the dam. We're looking down at the crescent. We're looking over it. So this is the mill pond. And the water drops down to this level out at the Lake Watrous. And of course, there's the causeway, which is in Bethany. At the end of the causeway is the Woodbridge Town line. This was the old farmhouse is over here. Appropriate. A little bit about the Burnham sawmill. We have our Ball's Mill. The property belonged to the Burnham family. A man by the name of Ball married into the family, was very interested in using the water power source. And thus a mill was built in 1874. There may have been a mill here in earlier times. I found a record of an Ichabod Umberfield that had a sawmill in Bethany in 1832. Where was it? I don't know. He lived on this property in 1851. More accurately, he died on this property in 1851, victim of an axe murder. Again, those of you who saw the Tales Tombstones Tell would have heard about the multiple axe murder committed by Charlie Sanford, where he nearly decapitated a couple of the local neighbors. This particular sign was put out in the 1940s, and we found it in the sawmill and thought we should pick it out and photograph it. It's just such a great sign. This is the earliest photograph we have of Ball's Mill. High dam, over 20 feet high. The mill here, there's a little shed that protects a cutoff saw. They probably threw, or I know they rolled down slabs and then cut the slabs up. saw at the lower level. At the upper level, we're looking at the little platform that would have accepted the boards that came out of the end door off the carriage. And you see the light through there. That's that great big wide 18-foot door that Mills had in the house. I like this one because I like the folks down there changing the tire. Back in those days, I guess that was a daily occurrence, and it didn't seem to bother people. It probably bothered me, but I'm spoiled. Again, here's a pile of boards. That's the door they would have come out of. Nice flow over the dam. Kurt Howard and his father George, I just put this in here because we've interviewed George twice. Happens that the Balls Mill was used intermittently from 1874 on. In 1947, an individual by the name of Arnold bought the property and thought it would be nice to reuse the mill, which he did, and asked George to set it up, act as a millwright, and I think George ran it for a couple of years, producing cedar posts, beams, boards, and stuff like that. And he protested that he didn't remember any of it. It was over 50 years ago. And then he said, well, you know, I don't know. I know it was a 40 horsepower turbine and used a 48-inch saw on it, and we ran it at 700 revolutions per minute. That just gives you an idea. Nothing like going to the source. This photograph was taken in the 1950s. The mill, there's that doorway. You can see there's no lumber out there now. This is kind of nice. This little stone bridge over the tailworks. The water would have come from the dam through a penstock pipe to a turbine. This mill had a turbine, and then would have flowed out and then back into the pond here. This allowed you to drive down to this lower level where there was a lower slope. This 1956 town report cover, very attractive. At this time, the mill was still being used. It had not closed yet. It was still an operable mill. However, we found in the assessor's records, I ran across this. I thought that was worth keeping. Sold machinery, equipment, mill closed. That's pretty final, isn't it? They sold all of the upstairs saw equipment. The equipment downstairs, the part that ran the mill, that was obsolete, nobody wanted it anyway. It would be just good for scrap metal, and they never bothered taking it out. Looks like a postcard, doesn't it? Or a Christmas card or something. This is after Mr. Sewell owned it. It's been recited. This little platform, you can see little supports there, platform for the product has been quoted in into a little shed. This is a 1982 photo. This was in our little booklet out there, Bethany in 1982. This is not a commercial, by the way, but the book is for sale. Looking up there, you see the difference? Look how the trees have grown in. They partially obscured the mill. Photograph of the mill in 1994, 3 or 4. Which was it, Will?
3.
1993. Mr. Sewell was very gracious and allowed us to take lots of photographs because we felt that this was the last remaining evidence of Bethany's industrial past. So we took quite a quantity of photographs. Many of them are going to be available on display on June 13th when we have our open house at the Historical Society. There'll be an exhibit of probably over 100 photographs of mills, more than you've seen tonight. Problem here is you didn't replace the roof shingles. And so that didn't last very long. These shingles are not very good. See what's happened? They just put some boards across there. This is gone. We're looking at the other end of that with the bridge over the tailrace. This is this past winter. I threw this in here to show you what a beautiful piece of work this dam is. Although it doesn't meet current standards, and that is a problem, it has huge pieces of stone that were raised with a hand derrick. Some of them, I've read a history written by Arthur Doolittle, and he claims that many of these stones weigh 8 tons. But notice the little subtle curve to this dam. The Bethany Historical Society would like to acquire the dam, acquire the mill, and supply the mill. And discussions have taken place to that end. One of the problems is the mill needs repair, of course, but the dam needs repair, and dam repair is extremely costly. Again, I wish you could see it a little bit better. These are single stones. They're better than 6 feet long, each of them. Perfectly fitted across the top. So you notice this has been here almost 130 years, and it has not succumbed as have many of the other dams. Yet it was probably laid up dry. Some places have some water. This is a time of the year when there was very little water going over. The amount of water that enters the mill pond and goes over the spillway is controlled by the Regional Water Authority, whether they open the gate on Bethany Lake or don't open it. Now, they just closed it last week because they finished the repairs on the dam, so there's no water coming over the dam today. By the way, that's me just to show you, again, some scale. It's over 20 feet. Sharon and my son on the right. It looks like we're on the Great Wall of China, but again, we're just on that curved section of the dam. Just a beautiful shot of the mill pond. I don't know, I like mill ponds. And this was a good one. All hemlocks. Just some leaves changing. I wanted to include this because these little iron rods probably held something that keep it from falling in. This is an intake for the mill. The mill is powered by a turbine. Interestingly enough, the turbine was installed in, well, I read one account said 1938, but there's some concrete that says 1939. So it's interesting that we would be, that people would be refitting a mill with a turbine as late as 1939. However, I want to just to kind of bring you up to speed with Bethany's progress. The southern part of Downs Road did not have electricity until 1947. So people like Arthur Doolittle, who lived in the next house to the north, used a gasoline generator to power for his electric power. This is the shaft of the turbine. It's a vertical one with a big gear, and you can't really see it, but there are wooden teeth all the way around. There's a bell here that runs that shaft. Belts went up to run shafts above it. These are still there today. This little room here, that little whitewashed room, was a generator room. And in the mid and late 40s, they put a generator in there and ran the turbine, ran a belt back from the big pulley through a belt door, and produced hydroelectric power for the house across the street until 1947. Anybody know we produced hydroelectric power in Bethany? This is that large shaft. It's got a clutch there, so you could disconnect this part of the shaft driven by the turbine from this wheel, this pulley rather, so you can make that one just stay still while the wheel's still moving. This large belt was hooked. See the hinges there? The little door that opened up, and you have a belt going there to run the generator. Some overhead shafts. You can see the roof was in bad shape on that little shed. Probably the only mill in Bethany that ever had electricity. Key tag for the generator room, which is that, again, this part right here. One of the problems with the mill is that the penstock, the pipe coming down from the dam, has failed, and this winter you can see it started squirting water out onto the various components. The iron shafting, the floors, the beams, and everything like that. Mill won't last long with damage like that. This is cut off. This saw still exists. This was for cutting up slabs and cordwood, run by water column. Just a kind of attractive shot of that tailways. To bring you up to date, in the last 2 weeks, the failure of that penstock has increased. A little bridge to cross. This is again on the mill property, so you get from one side of the street to the other. Very beautiful spot. It connects to the Waters. This is the Causeway restaurant. This is kind of a parting shot. This is where the lots would have been this level. In the background, a closer shot. There is a set of stairs that goes up to the top of the dam. Always had to have a wheel to control the gate. Water. This is a great photograph from, I think, the 1870s or 80s, and it's taken in Maine. So it's very, very similar to what the inside of the Falls Mill looked like. There's that wheel to control the gate, and that's probably about the size saw blade that would have been used in the Falls Mill. Just spotted this on the wall. I don't know if you could read it or not. It's a chalk tally of what was cut. 42 by 6s, 12 feet long, and so forth. Inside the mill, I'm going to give you a few shots. This was a room partitioned off of the mill as a workshop. And these shafts were originally powered by water and probably were used for various kinds of equipment. I can't tell you exactly what, whether it doesn't look like it was a lathe, but probably for maybe some drill presses or whatever was used for repairing. The close-up of the line shaft overhead. The other end of this room was set up as kind of a little blacksmith shop, a little stove there, small forge, anvil, and it's kind of interesting. There's a kind of a 12 by 12 beam that the anvil is resting on. What's interesting is this goes right through the floor and down to the base of the mill. So this is the top of about a 12-foot, 12 by 12. What we found in the mill, let me go back just a moment. We found some of these things. They're little narrow pieces, little thin pieces of wood. There's one there. These are hanging up here. There's some overhead. And these are patterns. And they're patterns for wagon parts, patterns for, used for horse-drawn equipment, like single trees and double trees. They're very thin, but you put them on top of a large piece of wood, trace it out, and then cut that piece out. And basically, for making replacement parts. These have been just hanging here. Nobody's paid any attention to them. We've borrowed some of these. They're going to be on display on June 13th. A couple of these on the wall have names on them. Many of them have names and dates. Two of them here have the name S. Woodward and 1912 as a single tree and a double tree. So I guess if Mr. Woodward asked for replacement parts, they just pull the pattern down, trace it out, cut it out, and there you were. This appears to me to be a replacement cross piece for a hay wagon. It's thin. It's only about a half an inch thick. Again, it's only a pattern. This one is for a log sled. And these all have names on them. One of them says New Haven Water Company. And they're all, many of them have local names. Again, here's some of your patterns. Guess we know what that is. That's called a pattern. And here we are. Actually, here, this is me. Just kind of regretfully leaving this very picturesque site. And that's it. We can have the lights. I know I'm going to hear from my wife that was way too long. So